If you're like me, you occasionally do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right? Sometimes it's subtle. Most of the time we have a good rationalization for our behavior. A famous guy reminded us and warned us of this habit. So when I began my journey, I thought about this question: what could we do to break through, bust out of our ingrained habits and routines? After 30 years of sitting in every kind of meeting, I heard people numerous times say, think outside the box. But never did I hear anyone explain how to do that. 15 years ago, I was introduced to a concept first discovered by Dr. Roger Sperry. He won a Nobel Prize for this in 1981, hemispheric division in the brain. His methodology and discovery was later adapted by and used by therapists to help people confront and overcome obstacles in their personal lives, intuitive writing. So I wondered, could this same methodology that helped them help the rest of us? And in business, could we use this methodology to be helpful in innovation and ideation? Well, after 5 years of interviews and research and a lot of help from the neuroscientific and psychological communities, I discovered the answer is yes. As it turns out, there's a hidden app for that. And it involves, I discovered this after developing it and applying it and teaching it to people over a 5-year period in companies and in one-on-ones, and it works really well. We got good results, more on that later. I think of it as the actual how to think outside the box. We're less likely, as it turns out, to get honest answers to the questions we wrestle with deeply in life unless we're using this hidden app, I found. You ever feel like this, where you get that moment in the shower where you have that big breakthrough aha moment, but otherwise we're on the familiar path? We do what we know, we do that over and over again. We're hoping maybe today's different, we get a breakthrough idea, but maybe not so much. We may be more like that hamster than we'd like to admit. So let me introduce you to this app in your own brain. I developed this short exercise which will help you understand exactly how this works. So you've got your pen and paper ready, right? So what I'd like you to do, this is the simple part, I'd like you just to write an answer to this question. If I were an animal, what animal would I be? Write down whatever answer comes to mind, presumably with your dominant hand. For 92% of us as Americans, that will be our right hand, controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. Okay, next, and where this gets very different, as they say in Monty Python, and now for something completely different, what I'd like you to do is move the pen to your non-dominant hand. And for most of us, it just kind of hangs there in life, right? We don't really use it for much. We occasionally open a door or move something, but we don't really use it, so you'll be using it today. So that's going to be weird. And if you want to have a weird but safe experience tonight when you go home, just try brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. It will feel weird. It will be like somebody else just got in your mouth. It'll be very strange. So what I want you to do is just suspend disbelief for a moment, take a break, maybe close your eyes. This will be helpful. Take a couple deep breaths, suspend disbelief. For this app to work, you've got to just clear your mind and just allow a different type of thinking process to occur. So what I'll do is I'll just read the question, then open your eyes and write down the answer. Some people describe they see it, they feel it, they don't even know where it's coming from, they write it down. You can open your eyes to write. This is hard enough as it is, so you don't have to do this with your eyes closed. So the question is, if I were an animal, what animal would I be? Bam. Write it down. Okay, so if you're like most groups, 90% of you will have written down 2 different answers. How many is that true for? Wow, okay, so what is going on here, right? Something unusual is happening. Could it be that you're experiencing hemispheric division in your own brain, possibly? So 80% of the people that I did this work with answered this question with their dominant hand with just one of all the animals in the animal kingdom, with just one of these 4 animals. Dog, cat, horse, bird. How many is that true for? Okay. Now, something really different happens when we move to the non-dominant hand. Here, the answers differ wildly. And I think with the dominant hand, we're getting an answer that is an aspirational answer. It's an animal that we would aspire to be. But with the non-dominant hand, it's all across the board. So, spoiler alert, my hypothesis is what we write with our non-dominant hand is an answer that's much more representational for how we are in life right now. So this may be bad news for some of you. If you're sitting next to one of these people, driving home with one of these people, you live with one of these people, beware, okay? So, but in all seriousness, this is a great way to take a new pathway and to learn a little bit more about yourself. These results can surprise even a scientist. I was invited to give an early talk a few years ago to a group of professors at Washington University. And they did this same exercise you just did. And then when I asked for volunteers, unbeknownst to me in the audience was an acclaimed, nationally renowned neuroscientist, which doesn't happen every day when a retired banker is talking to a group of professors. So when I asked for volunteers, up goes his hand. And he says, well, I wrote down dog with my dominant hand. And with my non-dominant hand, I wrote down giraffe. And I have no earthly idea why. So the whole room gasps. They know who he is. And then with a pregnant pause and with perfect comedic timing, another hand goes up, and it turns out to be his wife. And she says, well, I do. So she says, think about it. You're a giraffe. You see above what everybody else misses. You have breakthroughs. You found solutions. You're a giraffe. So the whole room exploded with laughter, and I wasn't kicked out. So instead of stopping there, however, I showed them how to use this app to think in big, bold, innovative, creative ways about the future of the Lifelong Learning Institute at Washington University, which is what the second half of the program was about. So it didn't surprise me that this result was good for them because I had used this process over a decade in my personal life. And I came to think of this app, if you will, as my go-to method for disrupting complacent conventional thinking. When I needed a big aha moment at the bank, needed a breakthrough idea, I used this. I didn't talk about it much as the CEO of a public company. I didn't want to get carted away and taken away, but so it wasn't until after I retired from banking 5 years ago that I began my research. I was interested to see if what worked for me in my personal life could work for others, helping them work through business and personal issues. 200 interviews over those 5 years convinced me that this app is a fast, effective way to break through, to get truly different and independent point of view. Participants were able to get this different point of view from their own mind, which was really important. It wasn't somebody else telling them what to think or what to do. They were able to look at and evaluate differently questions about either their spouse, their job, a personal or business problem. It's based in 50 years worth of neuroscientific and psychological research. Dr. Sperry's work beginning at Caltech in the 1950s was famous for the split brain subjects, those with a split corpus callosum, and they were able to look and isolate what each hemisphere does on each side of the brain. The work is continued with many all around the world, but these 4 I'm citing with Dr. Michael Gazzaniga and his work in science, and Betty Edwards in the art area, and Dr. Lucia Capagnoni in psychology. When it comes to what my insight was, not being a neuroscientist clearly, and doing the research and learning enough to know that the brain is still the most complex and least understood organism on the planet. So my thought was, and I didn't presume, I'm not qualified to presume what is actually going on in the brain when we use this app, but it seems that we're making a neural connection that's activated with the non-dominant hand through the neural pathways to the right hemisphere of the brain. And my interest was really as a businessman in the fact that it works. And so my thought was, how can we apply this neuroscience and develop a method that we could use in innovative problem solving? And that is what effectively I think of now is the how-to. Finally, the how to think outside the proverbial box. In innovation, over 400 years, you'll probably recognize these names and faces. Do you think that most of their innovations occurred late in life when they were older and wiser, or earlier in life? Well, if we put up this second set of innovators, you'll probably guess that what's true for both groups is most of their innovations occurred in their 20s, even including Einstein. So what does that mean for those of us, and I see lots of you here that are over age 29, so what does that mean for us? So, especially those of us, and if we're putting a bunch of us in a room, older guys like me with gray hair, and we're trying to think strategically in a boardroom about the future direction of the company or the organization, do you think this results in innovative, different thinking? And if we combine it with a 50-year-old process like SWOT, do you think this results in a good result? I don't think so. So SWOT, for those of you that don't know, stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats, and it's sort of the go-to method that's been used in strategic thinking and planning for 50 years. And my thought was, I wondered and was curious to see if this application could be used to potentially break through and disrupt and possibly replace SWOT. So my conclusion was, after doing work with dozens of organizations over the past 5 years, big and small, that yes, there's the chance that this application might someday kill off a SWOT. So that could be a good result. Let me explain why. I went looking for a guinea pig organization that I could test this with 4 years ago, and found one in CEO Matt Matthews' company, Crown Vision, here in St. Louis. And he was willing to try this. He was a little reluctant, but was willing to try this. And I asked him if we could gather all 34 of his managers, and I wanted to see if this app could work for the entire group, as well as the methodology that I was using for innovation and ideation. And so we gathered all 34, which defied conventional thinking, because normally he would gather, as was his tradition, just the top 6 executive officers every year for a strategy session. So we gathered all 34, and this isn't them, by the way. This is, they're actually better looking than this group, but we gathered them all together, and the second step was to ask them to write down answers to 6 strategic questions about the company using their dominant hands and their conventional thought process, and then they learned this application, wrote down answers using their non-dominant hand about the company, and captured those in silence. And I think that's really important in strategy, that we get these ideas cemented before we start talking in a group session, especially for the quiet people, because they have a tougher time competing with the really loud, persuasive, the most senior, the most tenured. And when it comes to, research shows, when it comes to brainstorming sessions, big groups actually do worse than small groups. So why is that? Well, what's happening, and you've probably been in this situation yourself, what's happening is as people have the floor and are shouting out their ideas, we forget to say, we lose our train of thought. So the brainstorming sessions aren't as effective. But if you have those ideas from either side, wherever they're coming from in your brain, written down, it's more helpful. And then importantly, when it comes to the writing down part, I found that what we get from this hidden app, wherever it's coming from in our brain, allows us to provide really oftentimes honest, concrete, specific, politically incorrect answers that the organization doesn't want to know but really needs to hear. So the participants have an excuse for saying what they otherwise might not even say at all. And this information really needs to come out in sessions. And then next, the groups were split off into small breakout groups, and each team was given the assignment to answer those questions as best they could and come up with their best thinking. And then they brought their best thinking into the forum, all 34 people that I facilitated, and we tried to figure out what the group thought was the best ideas for the company with those 6 questions. And then they voted on those ideas in what I think of now as sort of a democratization of strategy. And, well, needless to say, it worked, right? So I probably wouldn't be up here on this giant red dot talking about it, but they did get a great result. They broke through and had an idea that they hadn't in 16 years worth of previous strategic thinking sessions. So that was great. The other ideas, the 5 other big ideas, led to a 19% bottom line improvement for the company during a recession. So this worked really well. And there's one other quick story. One of my favorites, this is also from years ago. I met a really bright, capable guy who had recently retired from a company as chief operating officer on an airplane. And we agreed to meet the following week at Starbucks. And he was a really successful guy in his 40-year career. And I asked him the question, what could Enterprise Rent-A-Car do to improve the bottom line of the company, amongst other questions? He wrote down, was very thoughtful with his dominant hand, wrote down a bunch of things. And then when he learned this app and applied it, he wrote down just one word, that word. And when he wrote that down, he slammed his fist on the table and said, wow, that's the big idea. These other things are just nickels and dimes. So it was really satisfying for me to see this guy in his 70s, who was a very successful executive, come up with a brand new breakthrough idea with this new app he just learned that was very innovative. And so I now think of it as a way of maybe leveling the playing field for those of us over age 30 with those of you in your 20s. I developed and applied this with lots of organizations, as I mentioned, over the last 5 years. It's been really fun. I've worked with the Fortune 500. I've worked with nonprofits, artists, musicians, community groups, and the results are universally similar. It turns out we can unlock and activate a different part of our brain to produce big, fresh, innovative ideas, whether in our business or personal lives. So I hope I've inspired you in closing to try this app, take on your most important questions, especially the ones you do over and over again, and discover more of your world. Thank you.